The moon hung low over the farmstead when Callum Crawford heard the clucking panic from his chicken coop, and he grabbed the old hunting knife from beside his door with the practiced quiet of a man who had once fought in border wars. He moved through the darkness barefoot, his calloused feet finding the familiar path between the vegetable garden and the woodpile, his breath forming small clouds in the autumn air as he approached the wooden structure that housed his 23 hens and one temperamental rooster. The door hung slightly ajar, swinging on leather hinges he had replaced just last week, and through the gap he could see movement, shadowy and furtive, accompanied by desperate whispered words in a language he half recognized from his soldiering days. He pushed the door open with his shoulder, knife raised, and froze at the sight before him. A young orc woman crouched in the corner, her green skin pale in the moonlight that filtered through the slats, her dark hair tangled and matted with bits of leaves and dirt. She clutched 3 eggs against her chest with one arm while the other hung at an odd angle, clearly injured, and when she looked up at him her amber eyes were wide with terror rather than defiance. She could not have been more than 20 summers, and she was so thin that her ribs showed through the torn remnants of what had once been leather armor, now hanging off her frame in useless strips. "Please," she said in broken common, the word catching on her small tusks. "Please, I have children. They are hungry. I take only few." Callum stared at her, his soldier's instincts warring with something deeper and more human. He had killed orcs during the war, had seen them raid villages and burn crops, but he had also seen enough death to know desperation when it looked him in the eye. This girl was not a raider. She was a mother trying to keep her children alive. "Where are they?" he asked, lowering the knife but not putting it away. "Your children." She flinched at the question, clearly expecting a trap, but something in his tone made her answer. "In forest, half-mile." "They wait, they are cold. How many?" "2, girl and boy, small." Her good hand tightened on the eggs. "I go now. I take eggs and go. You not see us again." Callum looked at the eggs she held, then at the nests behind her where his hens had settled back down, clucking nervously. 3 eggs out of the dozen or so laid today. It was nothing to him, but everything to her. "You can barely stand," he said, noting how she leaned against the wall, her injured arm tucked against her side. "And it is going to rain before dawn. I can smell it. I go anyway." She tried to rise, pushing herself up with her good arm, but her legs shook and she nearly fell. Only her grip on the wall kept her upright. "Wait." The word came out sharper than he intended, and she froze, fear flooding back into her expression. He took a breath and softened his voice. "Wait. You have children out there in the cold and you are hurt. 3 eggs will not feed them properly anyway, and they will not keep you warm when the rain comes. What you want." Her voice turned hard, defensive, and he saw her calculate distances, measuring whether she could push past him to the door despite her weakness. "I want you to bring them here," he said, the words surprising him even as he spoke them. "Bring your children here. I will make a proper meal, something hot. There is a shed behind the house with blankets and a stove. You can sleep there tonight out of the rain." She stared at him as if he had spoken in some language beyond comprehension. Why you do this? You are human. We are orcs. You should kill me." "I am tired of killing," Callum said quietly, and it was the truth. "And no child should be cold and hungry if I can prevent it. Go get them. I will put water on to boil." She searched his face for a long moment, looking for deception, for cruelty, for whatever trap she expected. He simply waited, patient as the earth itself, until finally she gave a jerky nod. "I bring them. But we leave at sunrise. We not bring trouble to you." "We will discuss it after you eat," he said, and stepped aside to let her pass. She moved past him like a wounded animal, quick despite her injuries, still clutching the eggs. He watched her disappear into the darkness between the trees, then turned back to his house, wondering what exactly he had just committed himself to. Inside, he stirred the coals in his hearth until flames caught, then hung his largest pot over the fire and filled it with water from the bucket by the door. He had a ham hock he had been saving, along with dried beans, carrots, turnips, and onions. It was more food than he usually prepared for himself alone, but he had learned to cook for a squad during his years in the army, and the motions came back easily. He chopped vegetables with efficient movements, threw them into the pot with the beans and ham, and added salt and herbs from the bundles hanging from his rafters. While the soup began to simmer, he went to the shed and cleared out the old tools and sacks of grain, stacking them against one wall to make room. He found the blankets he had mentioned, thick wool that he had traded for in the village last spring, and laid them out over a pile of clean straw. The small iron stove in the corner still worked, and he filled it with kindling and a few split logs, ready to light. He was carrying a pitcher of water and a cup to the shed when he heard footsteps approaching. The orc girl emerged from the tree line with two small shapes clinging to her skirts. The children could not have been more than 5 and 7 years old, both bone-thin like their mother, with the same green skin and small tusks, their dark eyes huge in their gaunt faces. The boy carried a stick like a weapon, his small jaw set in what he probably thought was a fierce expression, while the girl simply stared at Callum with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. "This is the human." The boy asked his mother in Orcish, the words clear enough that Callum understood despite the years since he had needed the language. "Yes, Rack. He says he will feed us," the mother replied in the same tongue, then switched to Common for Callum's benefit. "They are frightened." "That is understandable." Callum crouched down to bring himself to the children's eye level, keeping his movements slow and non-threatening. "My name is Callum. I have soup cooking and bread and milk if you want it. Are you hungry?" The little girl nodded, the motion so vigorous it made her stumble. Her mother steadied her with her good hand. "What are their names?" Callum asked. "He is Rack. She is Nara. I am Grisha." The orc woman's voice was carefully neutral, giving information without offering trust. "Well, Rack and Nara and Grisha, the food will not be ready for a little while yet. The shed over there is warm and dry. Why don't you settle in while we wait?" Grisha hesitated, then nodded and guided her children toward the shed. Callum followed at a distance, giving them space. He watched as she examined the blankets and stove with an expression of disbelief, as if such simple comforts were beyond what she had dared to hope for. "I will light the stove," he said from the doorway, "and bring the soup when it is ready." "Why?" The question burst from her again, raw and confused. "Why you help us? You know what happens if village finds out you shelter orcs. They burn your farm, maybe kill you." "The village is 4 miles away, and my nearest neighbor is 2 miles in the other direction," Callum said calmly. "No one will know unless you tell them or I do, and I have no intention of telling anyone." "But why?" she pressed. "We are nothing to you, we are enemies." Callum looked at the 2 children huddled against their mother. Their small faces turned toward him with expressions far too old for their ages, and he thought of all the things he had seen during the war, all the waste and cruelty and pointless death. "Because you are hungry and I have food," he said simply. "Because it is going to rain and I have shelter. Because I can help, so I will. It does not need to be more complicated than that." He left before she could ask again, returning to his house to check the soup. The ham was falling apart now, the beans soft, the vegetables tender. He cut thick slices from a loaf of bread he had baked 2 days ago, laid them in a basket, and found a crock of butter to go with them. He had a little honey left from the hive he kept near the orchard, and he added that to the basket as well, thinking of the children. When he brought the food to the shed on a wooden tray, he found the stove lit and crackling, the children sitting on the blankets with their mother between them. Grisha had removed her damaged armor, revealing a simple tunic underneath that was more holes than fabric. Her injured arm was clearly broken, held stiffly against her body, and there were bruises on her neck and face that he had not noticed in the darkness. "What happened to you?" he asked as he set down the tray and began ladling soup into wooden bowls. "Humans attacked our camp 3 days ago," Grisha said quietly, her hand stroking Nara's hair in a soothing gesture. "They came at night with torches and swords. They said we were too close to their lands. We ran into the forest. Many did not make it out." "I am sorry," Callum said, and meant it. "Why, you did not do it, and we are just orcs." There was bitterness in her voice, old and deep. "You are people," Callum said firmly, handing her a bowl of soup. "And what happened to you was wrong. Here. Eat." The children needed no further encouragement. They fell on the soup like starving wolves, burning their mouths in their eagerness and not caring. Grisha ate more slowly, using only her good hand, her eyes never leaving Callum as if she expected him to snatch the food away at any moment. He settled against the wall and watched them, feeling something tight in his chest begin to loosen. This was right. Whatever complications it might bring, whatever risks, this simple act of feeding the hungry was right in a way that nothing had felt right since he had left the army and come to this remote farmstead seeking peace. "The bread is for you too," he said, nodding toward the basket. "And the honey. Children need sweet things sometimes." Nara's eyes lit up at the mention of honey, and when her mother nodded permission, she grabbed a piece of bread and smeared it with the golden sweetness, her small tusks showing in a genuine smile. Rak followed his sister's example, and for a moment they were just children enjoying a treat, the fear leaving their faces. "When did you last eat?" Callum asked Grisha quietly. 2 days. I gave the children what we had. I can go without." "Not anymore," he said. "There is plenty. Have more soup. You need to heal." "We leave at sunrise," she said again, but it sounded less certain now, almost a question. "Your arm is broken," Callum pointed out. "How will you hunt or forage with one arm? How will you carry Nara when she gets tired? How will you defend them if you meet trouble?" Grisha's jaw tightened. "I will manage. I always manage. I am sure you do. But you don't have to manage alone, not right now." He stood up, brushing off his hands. "Eat, rest. We will talk in the morning about what comes next. For tonight, you are safe and warm and fed, and that is enough." He left the shed before she could argue, returning to his house through the first drops of rain that had begun to fall. By the time he reached his door, the drops had become a downpour, and he stood for a moment listening to it hammer against the roof, grateful that Grisha and her children were not out in it. Sleep came slowly that night. He lay in his bed listening to the rain and thinking about the war, about the orc warriors he had fought and killed, about the human soldiers he had watched die. He had left all of that behind when his term of service ended, had chosen this remote place precisely because it was far from the conflicts that still raged along the border. He had thought he could find peace in solitude, in working the land and tending his animals and speaking to no one but the occasional traveling merchant. But tonight, with 3 orcs sleeping in his shed, he realized that peace was not the same as emptiness. True peace, the kind that actually healed old wounds, came from choosing kindness over fear, connection over isolation. It came from helping a desperate mother feed her children, even when every voice of caution and prejudice said not to. The rain continued through the night and into the morning, a steady gray curtain that turned the farmyard to mud. Callum rose at his usual hour and went about his chores, feeding the chickens and collecting eggs, milking the cow and the 2 goats, checking on the pigs in their pen. He worked efficiently despite the wet, his mind turning over the problem of what to do about his unexpected guests. When he had finished the chores, he made a breakfast of porridge sweetened with dried apples and cinnamon, along with fresh milk and more bread. He carried it to the shed under a piece of oilcloth to keep the rain off and found Grisha awake and standing guard by the door, her good hand holding a piece of wood that she had clearly chosen as a weapon. "It is just breakfast," he said, holding up the tray so she could see it. "May I come in?" She studied him for a long moment, then stepped aside. The children were still asleep, curled together under the blankets like puppies. Their faces looked less gaunt this morning, or maybe that was just wishful thinking on his part. "You did not have to do this," Grisha said quietly, taking the tray from him and setting it on the floor. "The soup last night was enough, more than enough." "People need to eat every day, not just once," Callum replied. "How is your arm?" "It hurts, but I have had worse." She glanced at the children, her expression softening. "They slept through the whole night, no nightmares. That is first time since the attack. Good, that is good." Callum hesitated, then plunged ahead with what he had been thinking about all night. "Grisha, I have a proposal for you. The rain is going to last at least another day, maybe 2. Your arm needs time to heal before you can travel safely. Stay here for a week, maybe 2. Let me set the bone properly and bind it. Let the children eat regular meals and gain some strength. When you are ready to leave, I will give you supplies for the road and you can go wherever you plan to go." "And what do you want in return?" The suspicion was back in her voice, sharp and defensive. "Nothing," Callum said simply. "Or well, if you want to help with chores once your arm is better, I would not say no. But that is not a condition. You can stay and rest and heal, and that is all." "Why?" The question again, persistent as rain. "This makes no sense. You are human, we are orcs, we are supposed to be enemies." Callum sighed and sat down on an upturned bucket near the door, meeting her eyes directly. "When I was 19, I joined the army because I thought it was the right thing to do. I thought I was protecting innocent people from savage raiders. I spent 5 years fighting orcs on the border, and I was good at it. I killed a lot of your people." Grisha's hand tightened on her makeshift weapon, but she did not interrupt. "Then one day, during a battle near the Westmark River, I cornered an orc warrior in a burning building. He was wounded, trapped, and he was trying to shield something with his body. I thought it was supplies or weapons. I killed him and looked to see what he had been protecting." Callum's voice went flat, emotionless the way it always did when he told this part. "It was 2 children. Orc children, probably his daughters. They were already dead from the smoke, but he had died trying to save them anyway." The shed was silent except for the drumming of rain on the roof. "That was when I understood that everything I had been told about orcs being mindless savages was a lie," Callum continued. "You love your children. You feel pain and fear and hope. You are people just like us. And the war I was fighting was not about protection. It was about land and resources and old hatreds that no one even remembered the cause of." "So you stopped fighting?" Grisha asked quietly. "I finished my term of service because I had given my word, but I did not re-enlist. I came here to the middle of nowhere and I tried to forget what I had done. But I cannot forget. I cannot bring back the people I killed, the families I destroyed. All I can do is choose differently now when I have the chance." He looked at her directly. "You came to my farm desperate and starving, and I have the power to help you or turn you away. I cannot undo the past, but I can choose kindness now. So that is what I am doing." Grisha was quiet for a long time, her amber eyes searching his face. Finally, she said, "We stay for 1 week. I help with chores when I can. Then we go." "Agreed," Callum said, relief flooding through him. Now let me look at that arm. I have some experience setting bones. He examined her arm carefully, feeling along the break. It was a clean fracture of the forearm, painful but not complicated. He had Grisha bite down on a piece of leather while he set it, pulling the bones back into alignment with quick, practiced movements. She made no sound except a sharp intake of breath through her tusks, her good hand gripping the edge of the blanket until her knuckles paled. He bound the arm with splints made from straight pieces of wood and strips of clean cloth, wrapping it firmly but not too tight. Keep it still for at least 4 weeks, he instructed. 6 would be better, and no heavy lifting for 2 months after that. 4 weeks, Grisha looked alarmed. But we are leaving in 1 week. You can leave whenever you want, Callum said. I am just telling you what the arm needs to heal properly. Where are you planning to go anyway? She hesitated, then admitted, I do not know. North, maybe, away from human lands, somewhere they will not find us. There are orc territories in the north, Callum said slowly. But they are months of travel from here, and winter is coming. You would never make it with 2 small children and a broken arm. Then what do you suggest? There was desperation in her voice now, the careful control cracking. We cannot go back to our clan. They will kill us for surviving when others died. They will say we are cowards who ran. And we cannot stay in human lands because humans kill orcs on sight. So where do we go? Where is there a place for us? Callum had no answer for her. She was right. Orcs who fled battle were considered dishonored, and humans saw all orcs as enemies. There was no safe place for Grisha and her children in this world of rigid divisions and ancient hatreds. Unless. The thought came to him slowly, carefully, like the first shoots of a plant emerging from winter earth. It was an impossible thought, a foolish thought, but once it had taken root it would not leave. Stay here, he said. Grisha blinked. What? Stay here, on the farm, there is room. The shed can be made more comfortable, properly insulated for winter. I have more food than one person needs, and the farm produces enough to support several people if we are careful. You could help with the work once your arm heals, and the children could learn to gather eggs and feed the animals. You would be safe, fed, and warm. You are insane, Grisha said flatly. When the village finds out you are harboring orcs, they will come with torches and pitchforks. They will kill us and burn your farm and probably hang you for treason. The village only visits twice a year, in spring and autumn, to collect the Lord's taxes and check that I am still alive, Callum said. My nearest neighbor, Old Man Thatcher, minds his own business and expects me to do the same. As long as you stay on the farm and out of sight when strangers come by, no one will know you are here. This is insane, Grisha repeated, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes that might have been hope. Probably, Callum agreed, but it is also practical. You need time to heal and to let the children recover their strength. I need help running this farm now that I am getting older. It makes sense. You are not old. You cannot be more than 30, 29. But farming is hard work, and an extra pair of hands would be useful. 2 extra pairs, once the children are old enough to help more. Grisha shook her head slowly, but he could see her turning the idea over in her mind, testing it for flaws and finding it less impossible than it should have been. I need to think about this. It is too much. Think about it, Callum said. You have a week. In the meantime, heal and rest and let the children be children for a little while. The children in question chose that moment to wake up, drawn by the smell of porridge and apples. Nara sat up first, rubbing her eyes with small fists, and broke into a smile when she saw the breakfast tray. Mama, is the nice human here? She asked in Orcish. Yes, little one. He brought breakfast. Can I have some? Rak was awake now too, eyeing the food with undisguised hunger. Of course you can, Grisha said, her voice softening as it always did when she spoke to her children. "Come, eat." Callum left them to their meal and returned to his house, wondering if he had just made the wisest decision of his life or the most foolish. Time would tell. The rain continued for 3 days, and during that time, Callum fell into a routine with his unexpected guests. He brought them 3 meals a day and made sure the stove in the shed stayed lit. In between, he worked on improving their living space, adding better insulation to the walls, building a proper bed frame from scrap lumber, and even installing a small window with real glass that he salvaged from an old shed. Grisha watched these improvements with growing bewilderment, helping where she could despite her injured arm. The children, quicker to adapt than their mother, began to treat the farm as an adventure. Rack followed Callum around during morning chores, asking endless questions about the animals and the crops. Nara was shyer, but she would sit near the chicken coop and giggle when the hens came to investigate her, pecking gently at the grain she offered in her small green palms. On the 4th day, the rain finally stopped and watery sunshine broke through the clouds. Callum was in the vegetable garden pulling weeds when Grisha approached him, Rack and Nara trailing behind her like ducklings. "We have decided," she said without preamble. "We will stay until spring." "If you still want us to." Callum sat back on his heels, studying her face. "What changed your mind?" Nara laughed yesterday, Grisha said quietly. "Really laughed, the way she used to before the war came to our camp. I had forgotten what that sounded like. And Rack asked me last night if we could stay with the nice farmer because he likes the chickens and wants to learn to milk the cow." She paused, her jaw working as if the next words were difficult to say. "They are happy here, safe, and I am too tired to keep running." "Then you are welcome to stay," Callum said simply, "for as long as you need." "Until spring," Grisha said firmly. "By then my arm will be healed and the children will be stronger. We will go north when the weather warms." "All right, until spring." He did not believe for a moment that they would actually leave, but there was no point in arguing about it now. Time had a way of changing plans. As autumn deepened into early winter, the farm settled into new rhythms. Grisha proved to be a quick learner and a hard worker, taking over more and more of the daily chores as her arm healed. She could not lift heavy things yet, but she could feed the animals, collect eggs, and help with the cooking. She had a talent for preserving food that Callum lacked, and under her direction they pickled vegetables, dried herbs, and smoked fish from the nearby stream. The children thrived in the safety and routine of farm life. Rack appointed himself assistant farmhand and took his duties with endearing seriousness, carefully measuring out grain for the chickens and making sure the water troughs were always full. Nara discovered a love for the goats and spent hours sitting in their pen, talking to them in a mixture of Orcish and common while they nuzzled her hands looking for treats. Callum found himself enjoying their presence more than he had expected. The farmhouse felt less empty with voices in the yard and the sound of children's laughter drifting through the windows. He taught Rack to whittle, sitting with the boy in the evenings and showing him how to shape wood into useful things like spoons and simple toys. He taught Nara her letters, drawing them in the dirt with a stick and watching her fierce concentration as she copied them. And Grisha, difficult and defensive Grisha, slowly began to relax around him. She stopped watching him like he might transform into a threat at any moment. She began to joke, revealing a sharp wit that made him laugh. She told stories in the evenings, old orc legends about heroes and tricksters and the spirits that lived in the wild places, and Callum found himself as captivated as the children. It was during one of these evenings, with the first snow falling outside and the fire crackling in the hearth, that Callum realized with a start that he was falling in love with her. The realization should have terrified him. She was an orc, he was human, and the entire world would condemn such a thing. But sitting there watching the firelight play across her green skin, seeing the gentle way she held Nara on her lap while Rack leaned against her good shoulder, he could not bring himself to care what the world thought. He did not speak of his feelings. How could he? Grisha had been through so much, had lost so much. She needed safety and friendship, not the complication of a human farmer's impossible affection. So he kept his feelings to himself, and tried to be content with what he had, her trust, her company, and the domestic peace they had built together. But Grisha was not oblivious. She had survived as a mother and warrior by reading people, by noticing the small signs that telegraphed intention and emotion. She saw how Callum looked at her when he thought she was not paying attention. She noticed how he always made sure she had the warmest blanket, the largest portion of meat, the most comfortable seat by the fire. She saw how gentle he was with her children, how patient and kind, and something in her chest ached with a feeling she had not expected to ever feel again. Winter deepened, and the farm became an island in a sea of snow. The roads were impassable, which meant no visitors and no need to hide. Grisha and the children moved from the shed into the farmhouse itself, sleeping in the second bedroom that Callum had never used. It was warmer and more comfortable, and he told himself it was just practical, just about keeping them safe and healthy through the cold months. It was Nara who forced the issue, as children often do. She had been watching her mother and Callum dance around each other for weeks, and one evening at dinner she announced, "Mama, why does Callum sleep alone? Does he not get lonely?" Grisha choked on her soup. Callum turned bright red. Rack, oblivious to the undercurrents, chimed in. "Father always said everyone needs someone to sleep next to when it is cold. Maybe Callum needs someone too." "That is enough," Grisha said firmly, her own face darker green with embarrassment. "Eat your dinner." But the question hung in the air between them, impossible to ignore. That night after the children were asleep, Grisha came to find Callum in the main room where he was banking the fire for the night. "I am sorry about what Nara said," she began awkwardly. "She is young and does not understand." "It is all right," Callum said, not looking at her. "Children say what they think. It is one of their charms." "Callum." She waited until he turned to face her. "Why are you doing all of this? And do not tell me again that it is just kindness. I have been here for 3 months. I have watched you." "This is more than charity." He could have denied it, should have denied it, but he was tired of pretending, tired of hiding what he felt. "You are right," he said quietly. "It is more than charity. I care about you, Grisha, about you and Rack and Nara. I care about you in a way that is probably foolish and definitely inconvenient, but I cannot seem to help it." She stared at him, her amber eyes wide. "You care about me," she repeated slowly. "Me, an orc. You know what that would mean if anyone found out, I know. Death for both of us, probably. Certainly exile at the very least." He gave a bitter laugh. "I told you it was foolish." "It is foolish," she agreed. Then softer. "But maybe I am foolish too, because I care about you also, Callum Crawford. I care about your kindness and your patience and the way you make my children laugh. I care about how safe I feel here, how this has become more of a home than anywhere I have ever lived. And I am terrified of how much I care, because I have already lost one person I loved, and I do not know if I could survive losing another." Callum crossed the room to stand in front of her, close enough to touch but not touching. "I cannot promise you that nothing will ever go wrong. The world is what it is and we are who we are, but I can promise that I will do everything in my power to keep you and the children safe. And I can promise that whatever time we have, whether it is months or years, I will spend it caring for you the best way I know how." That is a big promise, Grisha whispered. I am a man who keeps his promises. She searched his face for a long moment, then slowly, carefully, she reached up with her good hand and touched his cheek. Her palm was calloused and warm, and he leaned into the touch like a plant turning toward the sun. I have not been with anyone since my mate died, she said, and he was orc. I do not know how this works between human and orc. I do not know if it can work. Neither do I, Callum admitted, but I am willing to try if you are. Instead of answering with words, she leaned in and kissed him. It was awkward at first, their mouths not quite fitting right, her small tusks bumping against his lips. But they adjusted, learning the shape of each other, and the awkwardness transformed into something sweet and tender and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Grisha rested her forehead against his and laughed quietly. We are both insane. Probably, Callum agreed, wrapping his arms around her waist and holding her close. But I find I do not mind. They stood like that for a long time, simply holding each other until Grisha finally pulled back with a sigh. I should go check on the children. Will you come back? The question was vulnerable, almost childlike in its hope. She smiled, her tusks catching the firelight. Yes. If you want me to. I want you to. She did come back after checking that Rack and Nara were safely asleep. She came to his room and his bed, and they spent the night learning each other with hands and mouths and whispered words, discovering that desire and tenderness needed no translation between species. It was not perfect. There were moments of uncertainty and adjustment, times when they had to laugh at their own fumbling. But it was real and honest and filled with a kind of joy that Callum had not known he was capable of feeling. In the morning, they woke to Nara standing beside the bed, her small face split in a huge grin. I told Rack that Mama would not be lonely anymore, she announced proudly. He did not believe me, but I was right. Grisha groaned and pulled a pillow over her face while Callum tried very hard not to laugh. Good morning, Nara, he managed. Good morning, Callum. Can we have pancakes for breakfast? Mama makes them on special days, and I think this is a special day. Pancakes sound perfect, Callum said, surrendering to the inevitable. Go tell Rack to get washed up and we will make them together. Nara scampered off, and Grisha emerged from under the pillow looking mortified. I am so sorry. Do not be. She is right. It is a special day. He kissed her forehead gently. Come on. Let's go make pancakes with our children. Our children. The words hung in the air between them, enormous and impossible and somehow exactly right. Grisha's eyes went bright with unshed tears, and she nodded, not trusting her voice. The days that followed were some of the happiest of Callum's life. He and Grisha fell into the rhythms of partnership, working side by side during the day and coming together at night. The children adapted with the easy resilience of youth, accepting Callum as a new part of their family without question or complaint. Rack started calling him Callum Father within a week, and Nara followed her brother's lead. But their happiness existed in a fragile bubble, separate from the outside world, and bubbles always eventually burst. The tax collector came in early spring, earlier than usual because the winter had been mild and the roads had cleared quickly. Callum spotted the horse and cart coming up the road while he was working in the vegetable garden, and his heart seized with terror. Grisha, he called urgently, get the children to the shed. Now, someone is coming. She did not question or hesitate. Within minutes, she had Rack and Nara hidden in the shed with strict instructions to stay silent no matter what they heard. Callum helped her erase any obvious signs of their presence. Extra dishes, too many blankets, the small toys Rack had carved. By the time the tax collector's cart rolled into the farmyard, the house looked like the home of a man who lived alone. Callum went out to meet the collector, a thin man named Martin Brenner who had held the position for as long as Callum had lived here. "Good morning, Master Brenner. You are early this year." "Mild winter," Brenner said, climbing down from his cart. "Figured I would get the rounds done while the roads are still clear. How was your season?" "Good enough. I have the taxes ready." Callum had been setting aside a portion of his harvest for precisely this moment. He brought out the sacks of grain and preserved vegetables, the wheels of cheese and smoked ham that represented the Lord's due. Brenner examined them with a practiced eye, making notes in his ledger. "This is all in order. Lord Thane will be pleased. You have been a model tenant, Crawford." "No trouble, always pay on time." He paused, sniffing the air. "What is that smell?" Callum's blood ran cold. "What smell?" "Like cooking. Something with spices. Smells foreign." Brenner's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "You have not been trading with orcs, have you?" "There have been reports of refugees in the area." "No orcs here," Callum said, keeping his voice steady through sheer force of will. "I like to experiment with cooking. Helps pass the long winters. I got some spices from a traveling merchant last fall." Brenner stared at him for a long moment, and Callum forced himself to meet that gaze without flinching. Finally, the tax collector shrugged. "Well, whatever you are cooking, it smells good. You happen to have any of it prepared? It has been a long ride, and I would not say no to a hot meal." Every instinct screamed at Callum to refuse, to get Brenner off his property as quickly as possible. But refusing hospitality to the tax collector would be suspicious in itself, and might prompt a more thorough investigation. "Of course," he said, hoping his smile did not look as strained as it felt. "Come in. I have stew from last night." He brought Brenner inside and served him a bowl of the stew Grisha had made, carefully chosen from a pot that did not have any of her distinctive orc seasonings. The tax collector ate with obvious enjoyment, complimenting the cooking and chatting about the weather and the state of the roads. Every moment felt like an eternity. Every sound from outside made Callum tense, terrified that one of the children would make noise or that Grisha would emerge not knowing they had company. But the meal passed without incident, and finally, Brenner pushed back from the table with a satisfied sigh. "That was excellent, Crawford." "My compliments. Now I should be getting on. Still have 3 more farms to visit before dark." Callum walked him out to the cart, helping him load up and making small talk until Brenner finally climbed aboard and gathered the reins. The tax collector was just about to drive off when Nara's voice, high and clear, carried across the farmyard from the shed. "Mama, can we come out now? I am bored." Brenner's head snapped around. Who was that? Callum's mind raced frantically for an explanation, any explanation. "My niece. Her mother asked me to watch her for a few days while she visits a sick relative." "Funny, you never mentioned having family in the area." Brenner's expression had gone hard and suspicious. He started to climb down from the cart. "I think I should meet this niece of yours." "That is really not necessary," Callum began, but Brenner was already walking toward the shed. Callum caught up with him in 3 long strides and grabbed his arm. "Please, do not go in there." "Why not?" Brenner's hand moved to the dagger at his belt. "What are you hiding, Crawford?" Before Callum could answer, the shed door opened and Grisha stepped out. She had clearly heard the commotion and made the decision to face it rather than hide. She stood tall and proud, her green skin and small tusks unmistakable in the spring sunlight, her amber eyes defiant. "He is hiding me," she said clearly. "And my children. We are orcs. Are you going to kill us now?" Brenner stumbled backward, his face going white with shock. "Crawford, what have you done? Are you insane? Harboring orcs is treason. They will hang you for this." "Then they will hang me," Callum said quietly, moving to stand beside Grisha. "I am not going to let you hurt them." Hurt them. I am going to report them to the Lord's guard. They will hunt them down like the animals they are." Brenner was already backing toward his cart, his hand fumbling for the reins. Grisha's hand closed on Callum's arm, her grip tight with fear. Behind her, in the doorway of the shed, Rack and Nara clung to each other with wide, terrified eyes. Callum made a decision. It was probably the wrong decision, definitely a dangerous one, but it was the only choice he could live with. "I cannot let you leave," he said to Brenner. The tax collector's eyes widened. "You would not dare. Kill me and you truly will hang. Lord Thane will send soldiers to hunt you down. You will be dead within a week." "I am not going to kill you," Callum said. "I am just going to delay you. Grisha, take the children and pack. Take food, blankets, everything you can carry. We are leaving." "Leaving? Where will we go?" Grisha looked stunned. "North, to the Orc territories. We will figure out the details later. Right now, we need to move fast." He turned to Brenner. "I am truly sorry about this." He knocked the tax collector unconscious with a careful blow to the head, caught him as he fell, and tied him securely in the shed with ropes from the barn. It would take Brenner several hours to work himself free, and by then, they would have a significant head start. The next hour was a blur of frantic activity. They packed bags with food, blankets, and tools. Callum loaded his cart with everything he could fit and hitched up his strongest horse. Grisha moved through the farmhouse with quick efficiency, gathering supplies and helping the frightened children into warm clothes. As Callum was loading the last of their supplies, he paused to look back at the farmhouse. He had built a life here, had found peace after the war. But that life was over now, burned to ash by a child's innocent question and a tax collector's suspicious nose. Grisha came to stand beside him, Nara in her arms and Rack holding her hand. "I am sorry," she said quietly. "This is my fault. We should have left when I first wanted to." "No," Callum said firmly. "This is not your fault. You and the children deserve safety and happiness, and I will not apologize for trying to give you that. We will find a new place, somewhere far from here. We will build a new life. Together." The question was small, almost hesitant. "Together," he confirmed. "Always." They traveled north through the spring countryside, pushing the horse as hard as they dared while still preserving its strength for the long journey ahead. Callum estimated they had perhaps 2 days before Lord Thane's soldiers came after them, maybe 3 if they were lucky. After that, it would be a race to reach Orc territory before they were caught. The children bore the journey with surprising resilience, turning it into an adventure despite their mother's obvious worry. Rack appointed himself navigator, watching the road ahead for obstacles. Nara sang songs to keep their spirits up, her clear voice carrying over the rumble of cart wheels. They traveled through the day and into the night, stopping only when the horse absolutely needed rest. Callum pushed them hard, knowing that their lives depended on speed. Grisha never complained, even when he could see the exhaustion in her face, the way she favored her arm that was still not completely healed. On the second night, they made camp in a dense forest far from any roads. Callum built a small, nearly smokeless fire and they huddled around it, eating cold bread and dried meat in silence. The children fell asleep quickly, worn out from the day's travel. "How much farther to Orc lands?" Callum asked Grisha quietly, not wanting to wake Rack and Nara. "At least 2 weeks, maybe 3, Grisha said. "And that is assuming we do not run into trouble. Human patrols, bandits, wild animals. The border lands are dangerous." "Can we make it?" She looked at him, her amber eyes reflecting the firelight. "I do not know, but we have to try." Callum reached out and took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "Whatever happens, I do not regret this. I do not regret you. Even though I cost you everything. Your home, your farm, your safety, you did not cost me anything, Callum said firmly. You gave me everything that matters. You gave me purpose and family and love. The farm was just a place. You are home. Grisha's eyes filled with tears and she leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. I love you, she whispered in Orcish, the words soft and sacred. I love you, Callum Crawford. I love you too, he replied in the same language, his accent rough but sincere. More than I thought I could love anyone. They sat like that for a long time, holding each other under the stars while their children slept peacefully nearby. The pursuit caught up with them on the 5th day. Callum heard the horses before he saw them, the thunder of hooves on the hard, packed road. He shouted for Grisha to take the children and hide while he tried to lead the soldiers away, but she refused to leave him. We stay together, she said fiercely. We fight together or we die together, but we do not separate. There was no time to argue. The soldiers came around the bend in the road, 6 men in Lord Thane's colors with weapons drawn. Their leader, a hard-faced man with a captain's insignia, pulled his horse to a stop and surveyed them with cold eyes. Callum Crawford, he said formally, you are charged with treason, theft, and harboring enemy combatants. Surrender the orcs and you may receive mercy. Resist and you will be cut down where you stand. These are not combatants, Callum said, moving to stand between the soldiers and his family. They are a mother and her children, refugees who were attacked and driven from their home. They have hurt no one. They are orcs, the captain said flatly. That is enough. Now step aside or face the consequences. Callum drew his knife, the same one he had been holding the night he first found Grisha in his chicken coop. It felt like a lifetime ago. No, the captain sighed. So be it. Men, kill the orc and the children. Take Crawford alive if possible, but dead will do if necessary. The soldiers advanced, and Callum prepared to fight and die. He had no illusions about winning against 6 trained soldiers, but he could at least buy Grisha and the children time to run, to maybe escape into the forest where horses could not easily follow. But before the first blow could fall, a horn sounded from the trees, deep and resonant. The soldiers paused, looking around in confusion, and then orc warriors emerged from the forest on all sides, at least 20 of them, armed with axes and spears and hard-eyed purpose. The leader of the war party, a massive orc male with scars across his chest and gray streaking his black hair, stepped forward and addressed Grisha in their language. Grisha, daughter of Chief Murga, we have been searching for you. Your father heard that you survived the attack on your camp and sent us to bring you home. Grisha stared at him in shock. Krug, you came all this way for me. Your father's orders, Krug said gruffly. You and the little ones are to be brought back to the stronghold. You will be safe there. And him, Grisha gestured to Callum. He saved our lives. He gave up everything to protect us. I will not leave him. Krug's expression darkened as he looked at Callum. He is human. You cannot bring a human to the stronghold. Then I am not going either, Grisha said flatly. Grisha, be reasonable, Krug began, but she cut him off. I am being reasonable. This human is my mate, the father of my children in all the ways that matter. He chose me when his own people would kill him for it. He left his home and his life to keep us safe. I will not abandon him. Krug looked between Grisha and Callum, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke in common, addressing Callum directly. You are the human who sheltered my chief's daughter. I am, Callum said. Why, what did you hope to gain? Nothing, Callum said simply. I helped because it was the right thing to do. I protected them because I love them, and I would do it again, knowing how it would end. The orc warrior studied him for a long moment, then turned to the human soldiers who were still standing frozen, uncertain how to proceed against such overwhelming numbers. Leave, Krug said in common. Tell your lord that this human and these orcs are under the protection of Chief Murga of the northern clans. Any who harm them will face the wrath of the entire orc nation. Go. The captain looked like he wanted to argue, but faced with 20 orc warriors he was not suicidal. This is not over, Crawford. Lord Thane will protest to the king himself. Let him, Krug said indifferently. We do not answer to your kings. Now go before I change my mind about letting you leave. The soldiers retreated, riding hard back the way they had come. When they were gone, Krug turned back to Callum and Grisha. You have created a complication, daughter of Murga, he said, but your father loves you and will want you home. As for your human mate, that will be for the chief to decide. Will you come? Grisha looked at Callum, uncertainty in her eyes. He took her hand and squeezed it gently. It is all right, he said. We will face whatever comes together. She nodded and turned to Krug. We will come, but Callum stays with me or I do not come at all. Krug sighed but nodded. Very well. Gather your things. We have a long journey ahead. The journey to the orc stronghold took 10 days through increasingly wild and mountainous terrain. Callum was the only human in a party of orcs, and he felt acutely aware of his difference, his vulnerability. But Grisha stayed close to him, and the warriors, though not friendly, were not hostile either. They seemed more curious than anything, watching this human who had chosen exile for the sake of an orc woman and her children. Rak and Nara adapted quickly, excited to be among their own kind for the first time in months. The warriors were surprisingly gentle with them, sharing food and telling stories around the campfire at night. Callum watched his children, as he had come to think of them, blossom in this environment and felt a complex mixture of joy and fear. Joy that they were accepted and safe, fear that there might not be room for him in this new life they were building. The stronghold, when they finally reached it, was not what Callum expected. Instead of a crude camp, it was a proper settlement built into the side of a mountain, with stone walls and wooden buildings and terraced fields where crops grew in neat rows. Hundreds of orcs lived here, going about their daily lives with the same rhythms and routines as any human village. Chief Murga waited for them in the Great Hall, a structure of stone and timber that dominated the center of the stronghold. He was an imposing figure, tall and broad with gray-streaked hair and the scarred hands of a warrior, but his eyes softened when he saw Grisha. "Daughter," he said in Orcish, his voice rough with emotion. "We thought you were dead." "Father," Grisha replied, tears streaming down her face. "I am sorry. I ran when the others fought. I am a coward." "You protected my grandchildren," Murga said firmly. "That is not cowardice. That is wisdom." He embraced her carefully, mindful of her still healing arm, then turned his attention to Rak and Nara. "And these are the little ones. They have grown since I last saw them." The children, shy at first, warmed quickly to their grandfather's gruff affection. Murga gave them sweets from his pocket and listened with apparent fascination to their excited chatter about the farm and the chickens and Callum. Which brought the chief's attention to Callum himself. Murga studied him with an expression that was impossible to read. "You are the human who sheltered my daughter." "I am, Chief Murga," Callum said, keeping his voice respectful but firm. "My name is Callum Crawford. Krug tells me you left your home and risked your life for Grisha and the children, that you claimed her as your mate. Is this true?" "It is true," Callum confirmed. "I love your daughter and I love Rak and Nara as my own. I would do anything to keep them safe. Anything. Even live among orcs, knowing you will never see another human face. Knowing your own kind will consider you a traitor and an outcast." "I already am an outcast," Callum said simply. "And Grisha is worth it. They are all worth it." Murga was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally he spoke. My daughter's mate died honorably in battle 2 years ago. He was a good warrior and a good father. I did not think she would ever choose another. Father, please, Grisha began, but Murga held up a hand. I am not finished. I did not think she would choose another, and I certainly never imagined she would choose a human. But I have listened to how she speaks of you, Callum Crawford. I have watched my grandchildren run to you before they run to me. And I have heard from Krug that you faced down 6 soldiers with nothing but a knife to protect your family. He paused. You are either very brave or very stupid. Probably both, Callum admitted. Murga's laugh was unexpected and loud, filling the hall. I like you, human. You have courage and honesty. Those are qualities I value. But liking you is not the same as accepting you as my daughter's mate. That is a decision that affects the entire clan, not just my family. I understand, Callum said, though his heart sank. What must I do to prove myself? Live among us, Murga said. Learn our ways. Show that you can contribute to the clan, that you are more than just a burden. If after a year you have proven your worth and Grisha still wants you, then I will give you my blessing. But know this, if you fail, if you prove unworthy or bring shame to my daughter, I will kill you myself. Father, Grisha protested, but Callum spoke over her. I accept your terms, Chief Murga. I will prove myself worthy of your daughter and your clan. Murga nodded, satisfied. Good. Krug will show you to the guest quarters. You will begin your trials tomorrow. The year that followed was the hardest of Callum's life, and he had lived through a war. The orcs did not make things easy for him. He was given the most menial tasks, the hardest labor, the least desirable assignments. He worked in the fields until his back ached, hauled water from the stream until his shoulders burned, mucked out stables and repaired walls and dug latrines. Some of the younger warriors made his life deliberately difficult, mocking his human weakness, challenging him to contests of strength he had no hope of winning. He endured it all with quiet determination, refusing to complain or make excuses. But it was not all hardship. Grisha was there beside him whenever she could be, helping where she was allowed and offering comfort when she was not. The children visited him constantly, chattering about their days and showing him what they had learned. And slowly, grudgingly, some of the orcs began to respect him. An old orc named Gorda, the clan's primary healer, began teaching him orc medicine and herbcraft. A warrior named Drax started inviting him to training sessions, teaching him how to fight with an axe in the orc style. The clan's master builder, a gruff female named Shara, discovered that Callum had experience with carpentry and put him to work on projects that actually used his skills. As the seasons changed and winter gave way to spring, Callum found himself becoming part of the community in ways he had not expected. Children who had once stared at him with fear or suspicion now ran to show him treasures they had found. Warriors nodded to him in passing. The elders included him in discussions about farming and building and the management of clan resources. And through it all, his relationship with Grisha deepened and strengthened. They could not live together as mates, not until Murga gave his official approval, but they spent every moment they could steal in each other's company. They talked long into the night about their pasts, their hopes, their fears. They learned each other's languages more fluently, switching between common and orcish with increasing ease. The year came full circle with the spring planting. Callum stood in the fields working beside orc farmers who had become his friends, and he realized with a start that he was happy. Truly, deeply happy in a way he had not been since before the war. He had found a place where he belonged, a family that accepted him, work that mattered. That evening, Chief Murga summoned him to the great hall. Grisha was there too, along with the clan elders and many of the warriors. Callum felt his heart pounding as he walked to stand before the chief, knowing that his fate would be decided in the next few moments. "Callum Crawford," Murga said formally, "a year ago I gave you a challenge. To live among us, to prove your worth, to show that you were worthy of my daughter and our clan. What say you now? Have you met this challenge?" "That is not for me to say, Chief Murga," Callum replied carefully. "I have done my best to serve the clan honorably and to learn your ways. Whether that is enough is for you and the elders to decide." Murga looked around at the gathered orcs. "What say the clan? Has this human proven himself?" Gorda spoke first. "He has learned healing with a dedication I have rarely seen. He saved 3 lives this winter with his knowledge and quick thinking. I say he has proven himself." Drac stood next. "He fights with honor and courage, even knowing he can never match an orc's strength. He trains harder than warriors half his age. I say he has proven himself." Shara was third. "His carpentry has improved our homes and our defenses. He works without complaint and teaches his skills freely to others. I say he has proven himself." One by one, the orcs stood and spoke. Some praised his work, others his character, a few his dedication to Grisha and the children. When the last had spoken, Murga turned back to Callum with an expression that might have been pride. "The clan has spoken," he said. "You have proven yourself worthy, Callum Crawford. If my daughter will still have you, you have my blessing to be her mate." Grisha did not wait for formality. She crossed the hall in 3 long strides and threw her arms around Callum, laughing and crying at the same time. "Of course I will have you, you foolish, wonderful human. I have been waiting for this day since you first gave me those eggs and told me to bring my children to eat." The hall erupted in cheers and laughter. Murga declared a feast, and the celebration lasted long into the night. There was music and dancing and more food than Callum had seen in months. Rak and Nara were beside themselves with joy, dancing with abandon and declaring to everyone who would listen that Callum was officially their father now. As the moon rose high overhead, Callum and Grisha slipped away from the celebration to walk in the quiet gardens behind the great hall. The air was sweet with the scent of spring flowers, and stars filled the sky like scattered diamonds. "Are you happy?" Grisha asked softly, her hand warm in his. "More than I have ever been," Callum said honestly. "I thought I had lost everything when we fled my farm, but I was wrong. I lost a place, but I gained a home. I lost the life I knew, but I found the life I was meant to live." "With me and the children," Grisha said, a statement rather than a question. "With you and the children," he confirmed. "With the clan. With people who see me for who I am, not what I am." She turned to face him, her amber eyes bright with emotion. "I love you, Callum Crawford. Thank you for being brave enough to offer 3 eggs to a desperate orc girl. Thank you for seeing me when everyone else only saw a monster. Thank you for choosing us." "Thank you for letting me," Callum replied, and kissed her under the stars. They were married in the orc tradition 3 days later, a ceremony that involved ritual scarification, the exchange of blood oaths, and a feast that lasted from dawn until long past midnight. Callum bore the marks of his marriage proudly. 2 parallel scars on his forearm that marked him as Grisha's mate, and a new name in the orc tongue, Kalthar, which meant bridge between worlds. He and Grisha were given a house of their own near the edge of the stronghold, a sturdy structure of stone and wood with room for a growing family. They moved in with Rak and Nara, setting up a home that blended human and orc traditions in equal measure. Callum built furniture in the human style, while Grisha hung orc tapestries and blessing charms. They cooked meals that combined recipes from both cultures, creating something new and uniquely theirs. The children thrived in this environment. Rak continued his weapons training with Drac, and showed signs of becoming a skilled warrior. Nara studied healing with Gorda, displaying a natural talent for the work. Both of them attended the clan school, learning Orcish history and traditions alongside the other children. Callum found work that used all his skills: farming, building, and eventually teaching. He started a school for carpentry and human agricultural techniques, sharing knowledge that helped the clan improve their infrastructure and crop yields. He never forgot his human heritage, but he built something new here, a bridge between two worlds that had been at war for generations. 2 years after their marriage, Grisha gave birth to a daughter. The baby was a perfect blend of human and orc, with her mother's green-tinted skin and pointed ears but her father's softer features and hazel eyes. They named her Kira, which meant hope in the orc tongue, and she was celebrated as the first human orc child ever born in the clan. Her birth sparked conversations throughout the stronghold about the possibility of peace between their peoples. If a human and an orc could build a life together, raise a family together, love each other despite centuries of hatred and war, then perhaps there was hope for something larger. Perhaps the old feuds could be set aside in favor of understanding. Chief Murga, holding his granddaughter with surprising gentleness for such a fierce warrior, announced that he would send emissaries to nearby human settlements, seeking dialogue rather than confrontation. It was a radical idea, one that many of the older warriors opposed, but the chief was determined. "My daughter's mate has shown us that humans are not all enemies," he declared. "And my granddaughter proves that our peoples can create beauty together rather than just death. It is time we tried a different path." Callum stood beside Grisha during that announcement. Their children gathered around them and felt a sense of rightness settle into his bones. This was why he had offered 3 eggs to a desperate orc girl all those years ago. Not just to save one family, but to plant a seed that might grow into something larger than any of them had imagined. The emissaries went out that spring, carrying messages of peace and requests for dialogue. Some human settlements responded with violence, but others, tired of endless war, agreed to talk. It was slow, difficult work, and there were setbacks and failures along the way. But gradually, tentatively, bridges began to form between communities that had known nothing but hatred for generations. Callum and Grisha became symbols of that possibility, living proof that the old divisions did not have to define the future. They hosted human visitors to the stronghold, showing them orc culture and hospitality. They traveled to human towns with Murga's emissaries, offering their story as evidence that peace was possible. It was not easy work. They faced prejudice and hatred from both sides, endured threats and insults and worse. But they persevered, supported by each other and by the growing community of orcs and humans who believed in what they represented. Years passed. Rak grew into a strong warrior who used his skills to protect the clan rather than wage war. Nara became a renowned healer, traveling between orc and human communities, and treating anyone who needed help regardless of their species. Kira grew up bilingual and bicultural, equally comfortable in both worlds, and eventually became an ambassador herself, carrying on her parents' work of building bridges. And Callum and Grisha grew old together, their hair turning gray and their bodies wearing the marks of hard work and harder years. But their love never wavered. Every morning, Callum would wake to find Grisha beside him, and thank whatever gods might be listening for the night he had gone to investigate a noise in his chicken coop. Every evening, Grisha would watch the sunset with her mate and marvel at the life they had built from 3 stolen eggs and a human's unexpected kindness. On their 20th wedding anniversary, surrounded by children and grandchildren both orc and human, Callum stood to make a toast. His voice was not as strong as it once had been, and his hands shook slightly as he raised his cup, but his eyes were bright and clear. 20 years ago, I caught an orc girl stealing eggs from my coop, he said, and the gathered family laughed, having heard this story many times. I could have killed her. I should have, according to everything I had been taught. But I looked at her, and I saw a mother trying to feed her children, and I made a different choice. I told her to bring her kids in to eat. He paused, looking at Grisha with all the love of 2 decades in his gaze. That choice changed my life in ways I could never have imagined. It cost me everything I thought I wanted, and gave me everything I actually needed. It taught me that love is stronger than hate, that family is not defined by blood or species, and that the most important thing we can do in this life is choose kindness, even when it is hard, even when it is dangerous, even when the whole world tells us we are wrong. He raised his cup higher. To Grisha, who trusted a stranger's kindness when she had every reason not to. To Rak and Nara, who welcomed a human father when they could have rejected me. To Kira and all our grandchildren, who prove every day that the future can be better than the past. And to all of you, who have built this impossible, beautiful community where orcs and humans live side by side in peace. May we continue to choose love over fear, understanding over prejudice, and kindness over cruelty, all the days of our lives. To kindness, the gathered crowd echoed, raising their cups in unison. And to love, they drank, and the celebration continued late into the night, filled with music and laughter and the sound of children playing without fear. And if anyone noticed that Callum and Grisha slipped away early, walking hand in hand to the same garden where they had promised their lives to each other 20 years before, no one mentioned it. Some moments were meant to be private, sacred, shared only between 2 people who had built a world from nothing more than hope and 3 stolen eggs. Under the stars, in the garden where spring flowers bloomed eternal, Callum held his wife close and knew that he had finally found what he had been searching for all his life. Not peace through isolation, but peace through connection. Not safety through walls, but safety through love. Not a life free from struggle, but a life worth struggling for. I would do it all again, he whispered into Grisha's hair. Every hardship, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt and fear, I would do it all again for this. I know, Grisha replied, her voice soft and certain. Because that is who you are. The man who sees someone in need and cannot help but offer them 3 eggs and a warm meal. The man who loves you, Callum corrected gently. Yes, she agreed. And the man I love in return, my mate, my heart, my home. They stood like that for a long time. 2 unlikely souls who had found each other in the darkness and built a light that would shine for generations. Around them, the stronghold slept peacefully, human and orc families resting side by side, their children dreaming of a future where such differences no longer mattered. And in a small house near the edge of the settlement, on a shelf beside the hearth, sat 3 eggs carved from wood. Callum had made them years ago as a gift for Grisha, a reminder of where their story began. They were simple things, rough and imperfect, but they held more meaning than any treasure. They were a symbol of a choice made in the darkness, a kindness offered when cruelty would have been easier, a bridge built between worlds that had known nothing but war. They were proof that sometimes the smallest gestures, the simplest acts of compassion, can change not just individual lives but the course of history itself. And they were a promise, passed down from parent to child to grandchild, that no matter how dark the world became, there would always be people willing to share their eggs with a stranger in need, to say, "Come in and eat," rather than "Go away and die," to choose love even when fear seemed safer. That promise endured long after Callum and Grisha were gone, living on in the community they had built, the peace they had fostered, and the countless lives they had touched. Their story became legend, told around fires and passed down through generations, a reminder that the world could be changed by one person's decision to offer kindness to someone who had every reason to expect cruelty. And it all began with 3 eggs, a desperate orc girl, and a human farmer who chose to see a person instead of an enemy. Their story ended as all good stories do, with love triumphant, family united, and hope for the future burning bright against the darkness. They lived long, full lives surrounded by the people they loved, and when they finally passed, they did so peacefully together, their hands clasped even in death. The stronghold mourned their passing as it would mourn the loss of any beloved elder, and their funeral was attended by hundreds of orcs and humans alike, all gathering to honor the 2 people who had shown them that peace was possible. They were buried side by side in the garden they had loved, under a tree that Callum had planted on their wedding day. And on their shared gravestone, carved in both common and orcish, were simple words that captured the essence of their remarkable journey. They chose kindness, and it changed the world.